Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 64. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are at the halfway point of the 128 teams challenge with Team 64 here, and as I'm doing for all the 32th teams, so 32, 64, 96, and 128 are going to have pretty gimmicky strategies to them. And today's gimmicky strategy is not only super gimmicky, but it's also really out of style in the format right now and just doesn't work. But today we are asking the question, how many not fully evolved Pokemon is too many? And the answer is probably 2. 2 is, well, I guess actually it would be 3 is too many. 2 is like you can probably get away with because of prankster Pokemon, but 3 is too many. But starting off with one of our not fully evolved Pokemon, we have Tinkaton here to support the team, as we have the Fake Out, but a Tinkaton has the ability Mold Breaker, which means that we can ignore the abilities of their Pokemon, meaning that our Fake Out can flinch like Dragonite, for example, or can use it whenever an Armored Tail Pokemon is on, well, I guess that's just Furgraph, but whenever a Pokemon that would negate priority moves is on the field, we can use our Mold Breaker in order to fake out a lot of things that we can't fake out with other Pokemon, as well as we also just have the Gigadon Hammer for doing a lot of good steel type damage, and we have the knockoff to get rid of the opponent items, and we have the Ice Hammer just to get rid of specific Pokemon like grass types that this team needs to get rid of very quickly. And we are running the Assault Vest on Tinkaton, so that way we are a very special tanky component, and we're Terra Flying so that we're avoiding ground type moves, since all of our fully evolved Pokemon are weak to ground. But moving into our first not fully evolved Pokemon, I decided to slot in Cottonee here, since it is a prankster Pokemon, and you're probably wondering why would you run Cottonee over Whimsicott in any given scenario, and that is because with this Cottonee strategy, we want to have the lowest amount of HP possible, so that way we are doing the least amount of damage possible to ourselves by using the substitute, because Cottonee can win a good number of end games. It used to win more before it automatically set you to level 50, because you could run like a level 1 Cottonee and then you can kind of do some fear stuff. But Cottonee has so low HP that it's pretty much able to pull off this strategy again sometimes, as Cottonee is hopefully going to be getting off the Prankster's Leech Seed into a last Pokemon, and then if that last Pokemon decides to attack Cottonee, we have our Focus Sash, so we're hopefully at full health, and then Cottonee takes the attack, and then Cottonee gets Leech Seed recovery, and then the turn after that we protect with Cottonee so that we get another turn of Leech Seed recovery, and hopefully, since the Leech Seed is based on the opponent's HP and not Cottonee's HP, and Cottonee's HP is super low, we will get more than 25% health with Cottonee, so that way we can click our substitute in order to make a pseudo defense for ourselves where the opponent is not able to knock us out, and then we just repeat what we previously did, where we get Leech Seed at the end of the substitute turn, we protect ourselves again to get Leech Seed again, and then we substitute, and that should always defeat the opponent by the time that Cottonee runs out of substitutes or protects. And on Cottonee, we just have the ability to go for Encore in case we want to disable something with Cottonee. If they protect in front of one of our Pokemon, then we can have Cottonee Encore in to protect, and then that kind of nullifies that Pokemon for a bit. And on Cottonee, I decided to go with a Terra of Ghost just so we're dodging fake outs with Cottonee, because getting hit by priority moves really messes up the Cottonee strategy if we're out of phase with it. But there are a lot of things in the format that mess up this Cottonee strategy, as Leech Seed obviously can't affect grass types, so you need to get rid of those with your other Pokemon. You're a prankster Pokemon, so you also can't affect Dart type Pokemon, so you also need to get rid of those with your Pokemon, and you also can't Leech Seed into Goldango, so if your opponent has Goldango, you need to get rid of that. Also, if your opponent has a Serena, a Bruxish, or a Furgraph, or an Indeedee that can last 5 turns with the Cottonee, that means Cottonee isn't going to be able to Leech Seed into that slot because they're going to be negating Cottonee's priority. And even after all that, your opponent might just have a Terra Grass for Cottonee, which means that even if you get Cottonee at the end and you Leech Seed into the opponent, they might just surprise you with Terra Grass. Or worse yet, your opponent will have a sound-based move, which means that they can completely ignore your substitute. Or a multi-hit move also ignores the substitute. I've seen some triple axles while trying to run this Cottonee, and yeah, they break your substitute. Also, if on the first turn your opponent decides to like go for a Will-O-Wisp into Cottonee in order to status it to decrease the amount of HP that you get in between the substitute and protect turns, and eventually you're not able to put up another substitute before you leech seed down all your opponent's health, then you're screwed with Cottonee again. But moving into another not fully evolved Pokemon with Prankster, we have the Murkrow, and the Murkrow is here to help support our fully evolved Pokemon to make them do a little bit more damage, mostly just Chandelure, as we do have the Tailwind and the Sunny Day. And the Sunny Day is here in order to help out Cottonee, in order there's like Sandstorm, Tyranitar, which also kind of ruins Cottonee's strategy. And on this Murkrow, we also have the Perish Song, as if we cannot get off enough Leech Seed recovery with Cottonee, we can just stall with Cottonee for 3 turns by using Substitute, and then whenever the Murkrow clicks Perish Song, since we don't have any, let me just go over Cottonee's stats again. Since we have the minimum amount of speed investment on Cottonee with 63 speed, if Cottonee is the slowest on the field and we Perish Song while Murkrow and Cottonee are in the endgame, and the opponent only has 2 Pokemon that are faster than Cottonee, then Cottonee is going to win the Perish Song endgame. And then in Murkrow, we also just have the Taunt in order to keep the opponent from going for status moves that would maybe stop Cottonee. I guess Taunt full-on just stops Cottonee and forces it to struggle, which is another downside of using Cottonee in this format, is that can happen. But on Murkrow, we are going with the Covert Cloak so that we're not getting faked out, but we're also not getting affected by any other secondary effect type of move, but Fake Out is the most notable one. Next up, we have our third not fully evolved Pokemon, and we are going with Charjabug, as Charjabug is the only Pokemon in the game that has the ability Battery, which will multiply the power of special attacks by 1.3 times, which is very similar to Stonejourner's Power Spot, and probably in most scenarios you should just be using Stonejourner, as Charjabug only allows us to boost the power of our special attackers, which we only have 2 of those on this team. But since Charjabug is a not fully evolved Pokemon, we are going with the Eviolite to try and make Charjabug as tanky as possible, and we gave it some supporting moves in the Thunder Wave in order to try and add some variance in our favor in those long Cottonee endgames, where Cottonee can maybe get another turn of the Leech Seed in order to make it last on the field for longer. We also have the Struggle Bug for decreasing the special attack of the opponent's Pokemon to make it so that they do less damage into all of our Pokemon, and we just have that slow Volt Switch with the Charjabug, which can be kind of handy because whenever one of our faster Pokemon attacks, we can then Volt Switch out with Charjabug in order to bring in a different Pokemon, maybe like Murkrow or Cottonee or Tinkaton, in order to gain some good positioning. Next up, we got Chandelure, and Chandelure is just here in order to cook the Grass-type Pokemon with its Heat Wave, and we have the Choice Specs in order to increase our damage. We can also kind of take out the Fire-type Pokemon that would threaten Cottonee with maybe like a Heat Wave burn or something like that. And Tinkaton and Lucario are Steel types, so it is nice to have a fire immunity on Chandelure in order to pressure Fire types maybe into not clicking their Fire type moves. But we also have the Stab, Shadow Ball, and Overheat just for good coverage options in case the opponent has like Wide Guard or if they're switching around their mons. And we also have the Trick that we can try and use to brick a Pokemon if they have like Amoonguss, for example, and we use Chandelure to trick a Choice Specs onto Amoonguss who clicks Spore then after, then that Amoonguss can no longer damage Cottonee, which means that Cottonee has an easier job in the endgame, even though Cottonee can't click Leech Seed into the Amoonguss. So at that point, it would just be a PP war, but Cottonee should win the PP war because of the Choice Specs. Amoonguss will just be forced to click Spore over and over again. And we're Terra Grass on Chandelure, since Grass allows us to specifically, I guess, avoid Pokemon like Amoonguss that want to redirect us using the Ridge Powder or put Chandelure to sleep, and we're Flash Fire, so even if we go Terra Grass, we won't be weak to Fire-type moves. And lastly, we have Lucario here, who I decided to slot in as a Steel and Fighting type in order to beat the Dark type Pokemon, and we also have some good coverage on the Shadow Ball in order to hit things like Goldango, but Lucario can ideally like take out something that's kind of frail like immediately with its fast Final Gambit, as Lucario doesn't have a lot of HP, but you can like you can take out maybe like half the game with the Final Gambit. Definitely not like the tankier Pokemon, but you can like take out enough of them that it might come up in some games where you get like an easy Final Gambit turn 1.
But Lucario is able to use its special attack, so we are slotting in the Aura Sphere and the Flash Cannon for both of our good stab damages. And as I mentioned before, we have the Shadow Ball with the Terra Ghost, mostly just for trying to hit Goldango if Chandelure can't hit Goldango. And since we're inner focused, we won't be getting faked out on Lucario, which is nice because, as we mentioned with Cottonee, fake out really ruins Cottonee, so it's nice to have Chandelure and Lucario who can deal with fake out users. And we're Choice Scarf just so we can be really speedy with Lucario and hopefully get off that one really good surprise attack. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Okay, so we're not going to have too many battles today, as this is a pretty gimmicky strategy, and I feel like these next two battles definitely convey the idea that I'm trying to go with Cottonee. Also ignore the fact that there's a Gothitelle here. I originally had Gothitelle on this team, but it wasn't doing anything. But the opponent has a Rain team here, but they also have the Goldango, and Ludicolo and Amoonguss are both a bit of surprise grass types here that are obviously Cottonee can't do anything to. So Cottonee already loses to like half of this endgame, but they also have Tyranitar for the sand, which extra makes Cottonee lose because Tyranitar's also a dark type, which means that we lose to 4 out of 6 of these Pokemon, so we need to get rid of 4 out of 6 of them in order for Cottonee to win an endgame here. So we decided to start with Murkrow and Lucario, hoping that they would maybe lead some other things that we need to start picking off, and they at least do lead Ludicolo, and they bring the Pelipper, so because they brought Pelipper, the Cottonee has at least somewhat of an endgame here. So we immediately catch the fake out on Lucario, but Lucario's inner focus, and Murkrow is covered cloak, so we don't care about the fake out. And we get the Sunny Day and the Aura Sphere into Ludicolo as Pelipper goes for the Tailwind, and they swap Goldango and Amoonguss here as we decide to swap Chandelure, as I figured Pelipper would swap into something, and now we're bringing Murkrow back in here in case they swapped in the Pelipper, but they decided not to, and we flat out just get to Heat Wave both slots here with Chandelure, which is really convenient because we get to take out 2 of the Pokemon that Cottonee cannot beat. And now we just need to get rid of Ludicolo in order for Pelipper to win the game. And Pelipper misses the Hurricane there into Lucario, but I probably wouldn't have taken out Lucario because it's a neutral attack. And I'm just trying to taunt Pelipper in order to get it to maybe do something gimmicky, but since we have enough health on Lucario, I figure I might as well not take a risk here and click Final Gambit. And we taunt Pelipper, and thankfully Cottonee lands the Leech Seed, which is another way that Cottonee can absolutely mess up their strategy, is by absolutely whiffing the 10% chance to miss the Leech Seed on that one turn. But at this point, we perish on the Pelipper, and we have Cottonee set in place to just click Substitute and Protect over and over again. And at this point, I just decided to sack Chandelure. I figured might as well, because it gives us some free turn to swap out Cottonee, even though it was the slowest thing on the field. We don't have to take any real risk here. We can just substitute with Cottonee again, and the opponent can't really hit us as Pelipper is now being brought to its last turn of Perish, and the opponent just decides to full quit on that one there. Here we have a pretty good spread of Mons here, but they do have some notable things that keep us from using the Cottonee, as it's mainly just Serena actually. But Dragonite with Extreme Speed also stops the Cottonee strategy because it can just click Extreme Speed in the Cottonee, and Cottonee's priority is only +1, whereas Extreme Speed's priority is +2. And the Magnezone with like the ability to maybe paralyze the Cottonee on the turn that it tries to get up its Leech Seed into the endgame can also ruin Cottonee, and Primarina is known for going for Hyper Voice, so even though Cottonee resists it, it can still do a lot of damage into Cottonee if Cottonee is the only Pokemon left on the field. Also, Hisuian Zoroark is another Hyper Voice Pokemon. That is definitely an issue that could have come up. But the opponent decides to lead Serena and Malamar here. We get in Lucario and Murkrow, and I decide to Sunny Day and Final Gambit the Malamar, and Final Gambiting the Malamar is just not enough, but Murkrow takes the superpower, but he catches the triple axle here with Murkrow. So another reason that that Cottonee cannot beat Serena is present, but the Serena decides to go Terra Flying here to hopefully dodge a Chandelure's Heat Wave as we get substitute up with Cottonee, and Chandelure's Heat Wave does come out, and that just full on KOs the Serena, so it's good we got rid of that piece as Cottonee can now have some play, and we Terra Grass the Chandelure here in order to maybe take a hit from the Primarina, as we're still dishing out those Heat Waves, and as we see Primarina does have the Hyper Voice, but we're currently in Sun, and it is a spread attack, and Cottonee is getting good health back on that Leech Seed, and the Dragonite does reveal Extreme Speed and Extreme Speed Chandelure, but not for quite enough damage. And because of the Leech Seed damage in combination with the Chandelure's Heat Wave, the Premier is going to get taken down this turn from the Leech Seed, so it is now just Dragonite versus Cottonee, and we can afford to stall the Dragonite here for a bit, as the Dragonite does reveal it as Air Slash, but we don't have to worry about that, as Cottonee is always going to be faster, so we're at least never getting flinched by the Dragonite, and we can just continue to stall the Dragonite with the strategy. And the Dragonite even reveals it had a multi-hit move in the Scale Shot, but Cottonee is a Fairy type, so it is unaffected by the multi-hit move, so Cottonee just barely able to scrape this one out here with so many things that caused Cottonee to not succeed here. So I know those last two games put Cottonee in like a fairly favorable light, where it looks like it has a pretty easy time as long as you can take out the opponent's Pokemon, but here's a game where Cottonee absolutely dumpsters the end game here. As we see, the opponent has like a pretty good spread of mons that don't all seem to have any kind of form of synergy with each other, like maybe Sceptile is like Dragon Shear for the Haxorus, and then they just have Indeedee Armors for like Trick Room things. But the opponent starts Infernape and Haxorus, and we lead Tinkaton and Chandelure here, hoping to get a Fake Out and then some damage with Chandelure. And we Fake Out the Infernape here, and we get the flinch on Infernape, and they immediately decide to crit Earthquake into Infernape, and Chandelure even takes it, so we get massive damage into the Haxorus here. But as we see, both Pokemon are probably going to die to the Earthquake, so I decided to Terra Flying the Tinkaton, but Haxorus maybe predicts this, as it goes for Iron Head into Tinkaton, who would have resisted it. So, I mean, good play on the opponent, and also Charge Bug comes in and just doesn't get to do anything, as now we reveal Cottonee in the back, and they swap Armor Rouge here, and Armor Rouge gets a special defense boost, as Cottonee is going to protect, and we just Volt Switch into Haxorus in order to try and take it out, as Chandelure now gets to come in, and Indeedee hits the field again, so we're now trying to stall out the turns of the Psychic Terrain, and the Armor Rouge has heckin' Calm Mind, so it's stalling itself, but the Indeedee is getting tricked the Choice Specs here by the Chandelure, as the Armor Rouge is probably untouchable by Chandelure right now, since Chandelure only has Spread Fire type moves, which Armor Rouge is probably Flash Fire, and the Shadow Ball that we could try to hit Armor Rouge with is going to get redirected into Indeedee, who is a normal type, so I decided to try and swap Choice Specs onto the Indeedee to maybe force it to either decide to click Follow Me forever, and then Armor Rouge is just the only Pokemon, but Armor Rouge Terastallized into a Grass type, which means that this game is extra over, even if we manage to get through the Indeedee here, because, I mean, it's just everything is going against Cottonee here. There's absolutely no Cottonee endgame that works out in any way. Even though we do get through the Psychic Terrain, we Leech Seed into Indeedee. Cottonee isn't even able to take the Choice Specs Dazzling Gleam from the Indeedee, and Armor Cannon would have still finished off the Armor Rouge. But if we Super Ultra Mega Crit the Armor Rouge there with the Shadow Ball and took it out in one hit, then we would be getting a Leech Seed recovery from the Indeedee onto Chandelure. And since Indeedee locked itself into the Dazzling Gleam, which Chandelure resists, and then Chandelure could just Heat Wave into Indeedee, we could have had that endgame if Cottonee just did a little bit more, but it's so difficult to use Cottonee in this format. So yeah, that was the How Many Not Fully Evolved Pokemon Is Too Many team, / maybe the Cottonee team if you want to look at it that way. But there are definitely formats where Cottonee is a little bit more valid, as like in older formats you could bring like level 1 Pokemon, and then Cottonee would get like 100% of its health back from the Leech Seed and never have to worry about not being able to click the substitute. But if you're trying to run this Cottonee in this current format, it ain't it, Chief. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute tonnage, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.